Multinational company Procter Gamble has rescued the school year for thousands of learners in KwaZulu-Natal. The company has been working with the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, to restore and rebuild some of the schools that were affected by the devastating riots in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. Through their SiyakhaKabusha Initiative, thousands of children were able to resume normal schooling through the revamping of their schools. To tell us more, we are now joined by Anele Nzimande, P&G Southern Africa spokesperson, Muriel Mafico, who is UNICEF South Africa Deputy Representative, and Themba Sokhabase, who is principal of Siphosethu Primary School, which is one of the beneficiaries of this particular project. Thank you so much for your time on the agenda this morning. Anele, I'm going to start with you. Perhaps just take us through why you decided to embark on the SiyakhaKabusha project and how many schools have been assisted thus far.
Good morning to you. Good morning to your viewers. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. For us as P&G, it's really important to be a force for growth so that we can be a force for good in the communities that we live and work in. I think you will know that as P&G, we are a corporate citizen and we exist in these communities. And whenever we see the kind of devastation that we saw in KZN, it's not far removed from us. So that's why we wanted to get involved, because we are part of these communities, and also because we want to step up for the people of KZN to show that P&G cares in particular about education, and we wanted to find the right partners such as UNICEF to help rebuild the infrastructure that had been damaged.
All right, Muriel, let's bring you into the conversation now. I want to, is this initiative just a KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng focused, or are there any plans to perhaps expand and go further in the country as well?
Good morning. Good morning to you, and also good morning to your viewers. This is part of our long-standing relationship in the education sector with the Department of Basic Education. We have been collaborating with the department for many, many years in the area of education. So the response to the unrest last year is part of a broader and wider engagement that UNICEF has with the education sector here in South Africa. So we work with the Department of Basic Education, but we also work with the provincial education units as well as corporates. And that's why the partnership with Procter Gamble came in handy during the response to the unrest.
So Muriel, talk to us about how did you go about identifying the schools that you assisted?
So the process of identifying the schools was consultative. First of all, you recall that over 130 schools were actually impacted during the unrest. So there had to be a structured process of identifying the schools that would then benefit from the support that we got through Procter Gamble and other partners. So specifically, there was a multi-sectoral committee which was put in place to, first of all, do the assessments, and then based on the findings of the assessments, select a few schools. And this committee, which was involved in the selection process, actually involved education, Department of Basic Education, the provincial education team. Procter Gamble was part of the process, and so was UNICEF and the National Education Collaboration Trust. So it was a consultative process, bringing together different partners to really have an objective way of identifying the schools. So the 5 schools that were eventually selected were actually the most impacted, that were damaged during the unrest that occurred. And that's why they were then selected for this choice support that they got through Procter Gamble.
Mr. Sokhabase, I need to bring you into this conversation now. I'm literally, very excited and beaming with joy as we're having this conversation. I want you to take us through how it came about that your school was identified to be one of the beneficiaries, and maybe take us or give us an overview of the extent of the damage that was caused.
Morning and morning to your viewers. Our school was damaged in in those riots of 2021 in July. And the building, which is an admin block, was burnt down to ashes. And it was a very sad move because all the historical background of the school, as well as teachers' record and school records were destroyed. But when the NECT, P&G came to school and promised us that they will assist with UNICEF, we then have that hope that maybe things will come right. But we noticed when the meetings of SiyakhaKabusha campaign was starting, because it is when and where we were able to see that something is going to happen. Because when the handover of the main contract was given to us, to the site that the main contractor is now going to start, we were very excited, as we are right now, because the building, the refurbished building, admin block, it has been finished. So that makes us to be happy more than anything, to see that the dignity of the school is now restored.
And then now bringing you back into this conversation, take us through the various stakeholders involved and how these collaborations came about, because there's a saying that goes like, we're stronger when we work together.
Absolutely. We're stronger when we work together. And I'm so proud of what I saw when we handed over the school to the school principal, Mr. Sokhabase. The leadership on the ground from the principals in these schools, from the educators, the learners, the excitement that was there on the day, the potential. We got to see for ourselves that actually these are learners with so much potential, that are so passionate and so fiery as they gave us the speeches of gratitude. And it really warmed my heart, because you think it's just a building that you're handing over, but there are people that are filling up these buildings, the learners, the educators, the teachers. And so in working together and bringing this SiyakhaKabusha initiative to life, I'm very proud. I'm very overwhelmed by the work that we have been able to do together and what we have been able to achieve. And I just want to, congratulate Mr. Sokhabase and all the principals that have been in these schools that were selected, because without their leadership, without them on the ground holding hands with building teams and with UNICEF and with P&G, none of this would have happened. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the leadership in the schools as well that I think we ought to commend.
Now, Muriel, I know at the top of the interview you spoke to us about the possibility of this particular project, expanding. What plans are underway to ensure that more schools are assisted?
We have just come from the Transforming Education Summit. And during that summit, there were commitments that were made, including commitments that were made by the government of South Africa. One of those commitments was to have a comprehensive recovery plan, because it's important to remember that even before the unrest of 2021, we were recovering from the impact of COVID-19. But even before COVID-19, the education sector in South Africa, as is the case in other countries, was already in crisis. So what we are going to do following the Transforming Education Summit is to work together with partners to make sure that we recover the learning losses that we experienced during the impact of COVID, which is still there, by the way. COVID is not yet over, but also recovering, yes, in the case of KZN, from the impact of the unrest, as well as the floods. So the education sector, the country is experiencing multiple crises, and it's important for us to make sure that the sector recovers better and that we build back better, but also the aspect of building strong partnerships, because schools are not just centers for learning. they are actually pillars for communities. They are centers where multiple services are actually provided. So it is important that schools are strong, schools are protected, and schools continue to play their pivotal role as pillars in the community. So as UNICEF, our support is not just confined to KwaZulu-Natal, it is across the board. We are working with the Department of Basic Education to ensure that we really accelerate our progress in the education sector, knowing that the progress we are going to achieve in education sector is absolutely critical for the development of the country, so that we can really have a truly inclusive and prosperous South Africa.
Indeed, and schools are the heartbeat and pulse of the nation as well. Themba, let's bring you back in. So since being assisted through this particular project, would you say that it has helped the learners focus on their schoolwork?
Yes, very much so, because we as educators first, as I've said, the project has helped us to restore the dignity and image of the school. And we are managing now to have a safer place to work with. And learners are now getting what they are supposed to get, because teachers now have a space, have a place to utilize for preparing themselves, as well as for getting some work to do, like photocopying and other stuff. So that also is assisting the learners.
All right, that was Anele Nzimande, Muriel Mafico, Themba Sokhabase talking to us about the SiyakhaKabusha Initiative. This was at the back of that devastation that was, of course, caused by the riots that we saw last year in the country. Thank you ever so much for your time on the agenda this hour.